Have any, I'd like to call for approval of the minutes. Does anybody have
Chairman,
any
I
changes?
would move for approval of the minutes of our last meeting.
Second.
Second, all in favor, we'll do a voice vote.
I'd like some discussion if we can.
Sure, go for it.
At the last meeting, as,
Hold on 1 second, because I think we're Jimi Hendrix in here.
We got a lot of feedback, and I want to make sure you point I'm a new member, so I'm abstained. Which is appropriate.
any rate, at the last meeting, the chairman called for disclosures, and I responded because I was called on first. And the city attorney instructed the staff that I would not be voting, And later on in the evening, I asked to speak as the general public on an item, and what the issue that I raised was not incorporated into the minutes, which had to do with additional landscaping in front of a wall that was up for the board to rule on. I don't know whether or not that all needs to go into the minutes, but I would think that it should. It's up to the board to decide.
Mr. Chair, I move the motion.
Okay, do you have a second?
Second.
Okay,
So, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Stressow brings out 2 points. One, a legal issue of his ability to vote, and one, whether or not the minutes accurately reflect comments he made as a member of the general public. I don't want to speak to the ability to vote, but generally the minutes don't reflect comments from the members of the general public.
okay. So with the minutes as presented, let's try a vote again. Do we have microphone? I hear you. Okay, thank you. I'll speak louder enough just in case. So for the minutes to be approved, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Okay, motion carries. So as we continue, each member of the public that wishes to speak after each item presented and discussed by the board will have 3 minutes per item. Representatives of associations and groups will have 5 minutes. Jamie, if we could do a swearing in of anybody that's going to speak.
Yeah. Anyone who intends to speak, please stand and raise your right hands. Do you swear or affirm any testimony you give this public hearing be truthful and accurate? Yes. Thanks.
Chair,
Yes,
Pledge of Allegiance.
we don't have a flag, so I'm... Okay, technical, I like that. Okay, so, Bob, I'm going to let you lead us, once we have a flag.
Good rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Bert, and thank you, technology. So, we're going to go to the first agenda item, Board of Adjustment 230-3001. I'll take disclosures first, and we'll start with Bill. Bill, do you have any disclosures?
Just on
Okay.
case one.
Just on the first case. Okay.
Drive-by.
Site visit.
Site visit?
No.
Site visit.
Okay, do we get everybody there? Sorry. Okay. Then in that case, do we have a speaker that's going to be presenting?
Staff, did anybody sign in for item number 1?
She says no.
Mr. Chair, I move to table this item.
Okay. Okay, all in favor? Applicant's not here? Okay. We're going to move to agenda item number 2. Hopefully we'll have an applicant. Case number 230-20001. Thank you. If you could please state your name and case.
Disclosures.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you, Howard. You know, it was easier when I was sitting here telling the other person that. Okay, disclosures. Bill? Any disclosure on this one?
No.
None.
Site visit?
None.
Call vote.
Been to the site, had a brief conversation with the homeowner about access to the property.
Okay, and no disclosures for me. Okay, please go right ahead. We're good to go.
Good to go now?
You could, yeah.
Awesome. My name is Jana Loda. I'm an attorney with the law firm of Holland & Knight with offices at 515 East Las Olas, Suite 1200, Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm here tonight on behalf of Mr. Albert Lepage, the owner of the property located at 1408 Westlake Drive in the Harbor Beach community. Mr. Lepage had expected to be here at the meeting for last month, but due to its cancellation, he had an unavoidable conflict for tonight, so he pleased to ask you to excuse his absence. So real quickly, I'm going to run through a few slides just to explain the variances that are before you tonight. Here you can see the 4 different requests that are before you. One is a variance requesting a variance from the overall height of the light poles associated with the replacement tennis court. We also have 2 variances from setbacks for the poles on the south side of the tennis court from the property line, which I'll explain in a few moments, as well as a small variance from the southeast corner of the tennis court where it comes within the 10-foot setback. And then last, we have a variance from the front yard setback to be reduced 10 feet from the front yard setback of 25 feet overall. So real quickly, what I'd like to provide is some historical information regarding the existing tennis court, the permitting for the, for the prior tennis court and the permitting for the existing tennis court, and kind of what leads us to you here today. So real quickly, here's just an overall aerial context to show you where the property is located. This is, of course, the Harbor Beach homeowners community. You see there circled in red, that is Mr. Lepage's property at 1408. I'll get a little bit closer for you. Here you can see this is actually the replacement tennis court on the property. Again, everything circled in red is Mr. Lepage's property. To the east, we have Lake Sylvia. To the west is Westlake Drive. And of course, single-family residence to the north, and the south is, of course, the canal. This is the survey of the prior tennis court. As you can see, the tennis court actually was much closer to Lake Sylvia by several feet. It was only 6 feet from the edge of the property line. This tennis court was built well over 20 years ago in the late 1990s. All Mr. Lepage sought to do was to replace this tennis court and actually submitted for permitting, which you're going to see in a moment, which actually improved the existing condition slightly. Real quick, this is just, again, a photograph so you can see this is the old tennis court. You can see the tennis court did have lighting. You can see the poles. I'll just kind of point out here. You can see they're kind of like a patinaed green poles. They're tennis poles, tennis court lighting on both the north and south side of the tennis court. Unfortunately, the fence had already been removed. There clearly was a fence. The tennis court goes north-south, so literally Lake Sylvia is behind one end and Westlake Drive was behind the other. The fence had already been removed at this point because, as you can see in the picture, there's equipment there that is actually working on the dock and the new pier that went around the property. Here's an aerial photograph that I took that also shows through shadows the existing lighting that was there, because I know there was some question. You can see the tall posts and shadowed on the grass area, as well as you can see even the outline of the top of the fence and the poles associated with the fence on this photo as well. All right, so in 2021, the owner sought to permit and replace the existing tennis court. These are the permits that were sought and obtained from City of Fort Lauderdale. Permit for the demolition and reconstruction of the tennis court, a permit for the fence surrounding the tennis court, as well as the electrical for the tennis court lighting. Pursuant to these permits, they actually constructed the tennis court, and it was in connection for the electrical for the tennis court lighting and the footers that we became aware that there was an issue with the tennis court lighting, and I'll explain in a moment. Basically, the applicable provisions of the ULDR relating to tennis court lighting is the section R and CC of section 47-19.2. And subsection CC makes it clear that tennis courts accessory to single-family dwelling may be permitted within the required side or rear yards no closer than 10 feet. So the new tennis court was specifically designed to be sat 10 feet off of the rear and the south, actually all of the property lines. It also is clear when you read this section that tennis court lighting is allowed, because it specifically says that no glare from any lighting shall be onto adjacent properties is permitted. So clearly lighting is permitted, but unfortunately, the section is silent on the overall height of the poles. So in speaking with staff, they turned to subsection R, which limits light fixtures, which are permitted in the front yard to no more than 12 feet. Applying this, that's what necessitated really our first variance to the city, which was to request a variance to allow the light poles at a height higher than 12 feet. If you're a tennis player, you know you'd need to have a light pole taller than 12 feet in order to play tennis at night. This is the survey, the survey that shows the existing court as constructed. We commissioned some additional information for staff, which is what led to some of the additional variances, just to make sure everything was cleared up. One, you can see up in the, you can see from Lake Sylvia, we're now set back at our closest point, 11.5 feet, which is an improvement over the existing tennis court. We are set back 10 feet from the south as well as to the west. There's just that little corner, because of our property line actually curves at the southeast corner, which is where it's necessitating a small variance at just that one point. And then, of course, upon further analysis, we needed to request also a variance of the setback from the front. The other variances relates just to the light pole footings that are within that 10-foot setback. So here's just some photographs to show you the reconstructed tennis court. Here's the new lighting standards. They are state-of-the-art. They are LED lighting. All the light actually casts down. If you've ever seen these, they're, as I said, state-of-the-art LED lighting for tennis courts, just two poles on either side. This is a photometric that we had commissioned to show that at the property lines both to the south and to the west, we have absolutely no light spillage whatsoever. All the values are 0. And then once again, here's our 4 variance requests that are before you. One is to, again, request for variance to allow our light poles to have an overall height of 29.48, which is a total variance of 17.48 over the code permitted 12 feet, and to allow the south yard setback, this is the one adjacent to the canal to our south, to have 2 light poles from the property line reduced to 7.8 and 8.7 respectively from 10 feet. And then a variance of that corner setback that I was telling you about to basically from 10 feet to 9 feet, so a total variance of 1 foot. And then finally, the last one was the front yard setback, which is a variance of a total of 15 feet. That concludes my presentation. In the backup, there is, of course, our justification statement that includes the reasons for this request. If you have any questions, I'm here and able to answer any questions that you have.
Chairman, I do have a couple of questions, if I might. Jana, can you go back to the slide that has the code provisions?
Certainly. And as I'm doing that, I neglected to mention, we do have a letter in favor from the Harbor Beach Property Homeowners Association, which I believe might have been in your backup, and I have copies, as well as a letter from the property owner across the street, John and Gail Payne, also in favor of the request. And to the extent that they requested a timer on the light tennis court lightings, we were amenable to that as a condition of our approval.
So, and this is less of a question for you and a question for staff. As you read 4719.2, how do you read the interplay between subsection R and subsection CC? Because although there's a general height limitation in R for 12 feet, I don't see that repeated or referenced in CC, and it looks like a more specific lighting. And I note the city's tennis courts, although not in a residential district, the lighting on those is nowhere near 12 feet in height, or on the city's basketball courts or on any other city lighted nighttime park issue. But how do you read those two together? Or is it just the absence of a different height in CC, or?
Yeah, and as she stated, that there isn't any specific mention of it, so we always fall back onto the section that does relate to the light pole.
Got it.
And that's really all we have to go by, so, and we do that throughout the code.
Okay, Janet, two actual questions for you. One, it looks, and I didn't measure it, but it looks like you could get rid of all of your setback variances if you just ran the tennis court not east-west, but north-south, and there'd be plenty of room to run it without a variance.
That may be, but the tennis court was built as it is now, and it was permitted by the city in its current position that you see. I mean, the court has been constructed at this point pursuant to the permits we got in 2020.
And the court was permitted in that exact location, notwithstanding
Yes,
the
sir.
setback issues.
Yes.
An important point you might wanted to have illustrated in the presentation.
I was looking this way instead of that. That's my fault.
Those are all my questions, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. In that case, I'm going to open the public hearing. Do we have anybody from the public that wishes to speak on this matter? Okay, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. And I'll open it up for board discussion. Does anybody have any comments or a motion?
I've got two before a motion.
Okay.
I got a question.
Okay, go ahead, Doug.
How high were the former light poles?
My understanding, they were comparable in height, if not taller, because the new technology allows a shorter height, believe it or not.
I wondered if you could go to the photograph of the original tennis court,
Yeah, this.
the before picture?
There you go, here you go. This is being taken from the second floor.
I was not able to see that there were any light standards on the south side of the court.
There was one, and it very well may have, you can't, I don't know if you can see it, it's very faint. It's
All
right
right,
there.
I'll buy
The
that.
barge is kind of
I'll buy it.
obscuring it.
Yep.
Oh, there we go.
Yeah, you can see them.
Yeah. And
They
again,
look like the things from War of the Worlds. We have less of a problem with the height of the light fixtures variance, because I just think it's something missing from the code. I don't think you can effectively put in tennis court lights at a 12-foot maximum height and have them have any usability. And I note that city parks and county parks that have lighted facilities, their court lights are way higher. I've got a bigger problem with the setback issues, but if that's the way that it was permitted in 2020, I don't know how you tell them, gee, what we permitted before, we shouldn't have permitted that way, sorry, you already built it.
In response to that, I'm not sure that this before picture shows any tennis court fencing. And I guess what bothers me is that they had the opportunity, when they rebuilt the court, to move the court a foot or a foot and a half, and they would have been street legal on the placement of where the fences are.
If I may, we have no variance for the fence. The fence is perfectly legal, as I understand it. And we're meeting setbacks certainly from the east as well as the south for the tennis court. The only variance with respect to the actual court is that one corner, because the property line actually curves at that point. And again, I can't stress enough that we did receive a building permit for the demolition and replacement of the tennis court, irrespective of the lights, and the fencing that was received from the city of Fort Lauderdale in 2021, and the court was built in the location that was shown on those plans.
Okay, note that your variance request number 3 does note a setback variance for not only the tennis courts, but the fence as well, from 25 to 10.
I don't believe that a variance is required for the fence. The fence is constructed, the fence is actually kind of inside a little bit of the physical court because it goes down into the court.
Well, you're
think it
showing
is
on your
for-
plan 10 feet from the property line to the fence.
Which is what as far as the east, that's what the setback is.
Right. For a fence.
This is not the west? Isn't the street the west side?
Well, that's the fourth variance. That's the front yard setback variance. That's the west.
Right, which you're asking for a variance.
Correct. I thought he was talking about the south, forgive me.
Okay. So you're asking for a variance for the fence?
For our west setback, we are asking for a variance of 15 feet for the setback of the tennis court, which would include the related fence.
Bill, did you have a question as well?
I'll make a statement. What bothers me more than the fence is the lighting. Because the new technology, the lights are much, much brighter than old ones. And you may not have overflow, but you have these big, bright LED lights that basically the house across the way is looking right into at 30 feet, which is a lot more offensive than actual illumination.
And if I may respond to that, we do have a letter of support from our neighbor across the street, Mr. Payne.
Right.
And again, this court has been up and operational, and he has no issue other than just requesting a timer on the lights, which our client is amenable as a condition of the
And that would
approval.
be Mr. Payne, the architect. Yes,
Okay,
so I did mention that.
okay, thank you.
I don't have lights, so I'm just going to have to just kind of wave up. Colbo?
Yeah, appreciate it, Mr. Chair. So I guess I have a comment and then a question. And the comment is, there's a big difference between glow and glare. Are you guys all familiar with that? You know, a glow is, hey, the lighting is lighting up the area and you can see the light. The glare is when you look across the canal and you have these bright light bulbs and they're blinding, that's really the glare. And I think that's what we're all trying to avoid, that you don't see that the lot across the canal or across the lake or your neighbor's house is illuminated. You don't want to be looking into that light fixture with that light like a car shining in your eyes. I think that's more the concern. So I'd really like to know a tad bit more about the lighting, if it's truly directional, because I know we went through a similar issue last time I was on the board with lighting at the Cardinal Gibbons High School football field.
Exactly.
Where we had directional lighting, we had somebody saying, hey, listen, it's only going to illuminate this, and when you go a foot over, it's not going to disrupt anybody. So my fellow board members saying, hey, I don't want it to be intrusive to a neighbor, and maybe a neighbor that doesn't know it across the canal, but they're actually looking into a light bulb that it's obtrusive.
And I think I can respond to that and satisfy you in that regard. One is, when I was researching this, you can actually see photographs where there's like really no light cast outside of really the tennis court area. But as part of this, and it probably you can make it as a condition of approval, we still need to go in and complete the permit because we have not been issued a permit for the footers. So as part of the footers, staff can be charged with assuring that there's no glare, so that, as well as we've already proved no light spillage onto the adjacent properties.
And then my question was, I'm sorry, board, I'm still trying to wrap my head around the discussion of everything going on at one time with setbacks and variance for this and variance for that, because I thought I had all this and I'm pretty good, but we've gone around three different directions of, hey, the tennis court is permitted, the fence is permitted. We're simply discussing poles. But then I hear a little clip back here, well, the fence runs across the tennis court, supposedly permitted. Are we discussing just light poles and light bases, or are we going to get into the whole discussion of the tennis court?
The original variance request, because the court was permitted as you see it with the fence, was just simply the height of the light standards. When we got into the actual review by staff of the application, they wanted to look more critically at the actual setbacks of the light poles on the south, which is what led to those variances. They also wanted to see how close the court got to that southeast corner, and then, of course, the front setbacks. And that's what really brought in the other variances, was that staff review of looking at the court, where it was constructed as permitted, just wanting to make sure that we captured everything that was kind of affected with this court before we came to you all.
Bob?
I guess
my points in sort of agreement. You hit that Cardinal Gibbons thing. I used to live at the Royal Mariner across the corner, so it used to light up my
I
barbecue.
remember
hours.
that hearing very well.
The comments that Howard made regarding the design, I think, was great, but it's moot, given the point that it was already been permitted by the city and blah, blah, blah. I think from my point of view, having the support of your homeowners association is paramount. And if the neighbors and the association are supportive of it, that's good enough for me.
That brings up a question, was the letter that came from the homeowners association from the president, or was it voted on by the board?
I can't speak to that. I reached out to Annette Ross, who is the president of the Harbor Beach Homeowners Property Association, months ago before we even submitted our application, and then kept her updated. If you all know Annette, I'm sure she did what she needed to do to be able to commission that letter, but I personally don't know the answer to that.
Can we read the letter into the record? I'm not seeing, oh, never mind, I'm seeing it.
Final page.
She writes the letter on behalf of the association.
I know, that's why I asked if it was approved by the board or the association, or did she just take it on her own to write that letter?
We wouldn't know.
I don't think it makes a whole lot of difference, but.
Yeah, we wouldn't know. So we have to go with what we have. Is there any other discussion?
If not, Mr. Chairman, I have a motion.
Okay, please.
I move approval of the variance as requested with the one modification that prior to the issuance of building permits for the light pole footers, a demonstration of both light impact and glare impact be made to the satisfaction of city staff.
So in your package, there is a photometric, which appears to show that going to the abutting residential properties, that
Different
it's
from,
less than
different from the
0.5.
glare, which was the question. Whether or not light leaves versus whether it's a glare impact. I don't believe it is, but let's ask them to do that showing, because I believe the variance as requested under the circumstances meets the requirements of the city code for the issuance of a variance.
Second.
Okay. Jamie, if we could take a roll call.
Mr. Kent?
Yes.
Mr. Mead?
No.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Stressa?
No.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Elfman?
Yes.
Passed 5-2.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Moving on to our next case, case number 3-230-30006. The agent, Timothy McClure.
Chair,
Sir, before you start also, were you sworn in? Okay.
Chair,
Yes, sir.
before we start this case, the first case, is that deferred? Is it, what's the outcome of that
tabled it to
case?
the
We
next
tabled
agenda.
it to see if,
Tabled?
to see if the respondent shows up.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Bert. I'm sorry. Jamie, if we could please, he has not been sworn in. If we could swear him in, please.
Affirm any testimony you give at this public hearing will be truthful and accurate? I do. Thanks.
Good evening, board members. My name is Timothy McClure.
Oh, sorry, and before you start, I'm just going to have some disclosures. So we'll start to the right. Bill, any disclosures on this property?
No.
Okay, Doug?
No, nada.
Site visit?
Bob?
No.
Site visit?
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry, go right ahead, please.
No worries. We're here tonight requesting a variance from a 25-foot minimum front yard requirement of section 47.5.30, table of dimensional requirements, to allow an existing structure at a setback distance of 24.30 feet, whereas the code requires a minimum front yard setback to be 25 feet. Total variance reduction requested of 0.70 feet. Unfortunately, this property falls on a corner lot that has two front yards. when the actual survey was done for a spot survey, it was discovered that if you turned in a certain direction, it was actually inside your setback. The foundation had already been poured. We were at block and had ripped the roof off. So it was kind of difficult to go back and repair a 5 or 6 inch removal of the foundation. So at this point, we're asking for a variance of a 0.7 inch setback.
Okay, thank you. Don't go too far. Is there anybody from the public that wishes to speak? No, in that case, I'm going to bring it back to the board for any discussion.
I just want to point out, if you ever go by my house, you'll notice a chamfered corner on my house.
Yeah.
Because I was 2 inches over when we did the spot survey.
Yeah.
And we ground down the concrete in the corner.
You were too cheap to file it for the board?
Yeah, this actually is setting on pilings. And the
I want to go
piling's
back
right
to
in
the
the corner.
discussion of the prior hearings before the board. I didn't think I could get it approved.
You ready for a motion?
I'm ready to make a motion.
Go.
Go ahead.
I move that we approve the variance as requested. This is a minor construction mistake that does not affect any adjoining property owners. As much as I don't like to see it happen, I believe it meets the requirements for variance under our code.
Second.
Okay, I have a first and a second. Roll call, please.
Mr. Mead?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Stressoff?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Kent?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Elfman?
Yes,
Passed 7-0.
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next case, case number 230-40001. Do we have an applicant? Going once? Going twice? Okay,
Chairman, I move we table this to our next regularly scheduled agenda.
okay. Great, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Okay, I suppose no. Great. Next case, case number 230-40003. Andrew Shine for the respondent. And before you go, Andrew, any disclosures? We're going to start with you, Bill. We'll start with you each time.
I had a brief, relatively non-substantive conversation with Mr. Shine about a variety of issues, and he did mention he would be here tonight.
Okay.
Site visit.
Just a brief hi, how are you, but no substantial discussion.
Okay, Colbo?
Site visit, brief discussion.
Thank you. And I did receive a voicemail. Sorry, I did not respond back to you. Okay.
Good evening, Chair, members of the board. Andrew Shine with Lockery and Chakas, representing the applicant here. The property is located at 817 Northwest First Street. This is a far aerial. It's in an old industrial area of the city. Now it's more of like a heavy commercial area. You got self-storage, auto body repair shops, and it's a fairly unimproved area of the city. This is a close-up aerial of the property. We're surrounded by, there's a brewery all the way to the right, a couple of kind of manufacturing uses there. And right in the middle is this nice green space, and it's an outdoor dog park. It's an outdoor dog park called Barkyard and Brews. This is a very old aerial of the property from 2004. The reason we're here tonight is to legalize the back out parking that's on the site. This aerial is from 2004. They had back out parking here and prior. The whole street is characterized by back out parking. You can see almost every property has existing back out parking, and there's really no other place to put parking. If you have enough land, like the self-storage place across the street, you can build parking within the site. Self-storage also has extremely low parking requirements, so that helps. But in general, back out parking is ubiquitous on this street, has been for decades. Again, this is the old aerial showing that back out parking did exist. Assuming it was properly permitted, then we would fall under non-conforming rules, which I did write in the narrative. This is the property in 2019. The property was sold in 2020, and the applicant here is the tenant of the property. But this was the property in 2019. Very run down, asphalt everywhere, terrible drainage. It was essentially a junkyard for boats. When my client, the tenant, came in, and that's above, you could see the picture of what it looked like before, caused pretty bad drainage issues on the street and was just fairly unsightly. The current tenant put about $310,000 into the renovation of this property. All permits were properly pulled for it, including permits showing the re-asphalting for the backup parking. But you can see it's night and day over the last 3 or 4 years what was done to this property, and it's kind of become a gem of this area, at least compared to the more heavy commercial uses on either side. The reason that we need back-out parking is there's no other place to park, and that's why back-out parking is so common on this street. There's really no other place for parking. The code does allow back-out parking in some circumstances. One of them is if it's already existing and legally non-conforming. Unfortunately, we lost that legal non-conforming status when the previous tenant did that to the property. But there's no other place to park. So legal non-conforming is one way back-out parking is allowed. The second is if it's into an unimproved alley. Unimproved alley means an alley less than 20 feet that is covered with a hard surface. This is the alley behind the property. It is less than 20 feet and it is covered with a hard surface. But given the nature of the business here, they have people taking their dogs out of the car and bringing them into the dog park. It's not a real proper place to have parking. It can cause significant circulation issues in the alley. It's an alley in a heavy commercial and industrial area, so it's not the most properly maintained alley. It's owned by the city, but it's not the most properly maintained, and it's really not adequate either to have dogs in general, just walking out there, who knows what. But it's also not really tenable for the business itself. All of those businesses on First Street, or the vast majority of them, have back-out parking onto First. So that's what everyone's used to. It's what works. It's what's been working there for decades, and all we're asking is to keep the current situation that we have now.
Thank you. And although I did not do a site visit today or this week, I do use the storage across the street, so I'm familiar with this property. Thank you. With that in mind, I'd like to open up the public hearing. Is there anybody from the public wishing to speak?
And after the public, Mr. Chairman, I do have some questions for Mr. Shine.
Okay, seeing nobody from the public, we'll bring it back to the board. Go ahead, Howard.
Andrew, can you go back to the picture of the boat junkyard? Yeah, where was the parking in the boat junkyard?
Very good question. I don't know what the parking requirement for a boat junkyard is. They did keep some back-out parking. I don't know if you can see me point, but right in front of the building, there were, I think, 5 spaces of back-out parking, but it wasn't really a business that had customers there, so.
Still have a parking
I'm sure they have
requirement.
employees, and I know
Right.
they had parking requirements. It's a very good question.
I'm just not so sure you've lost your non-conforming use. I just think they've got a couple of boats parked in your backup parking spaces.
If you can convince Mr. Ford over there to take that interpretation, I would be quite happy, but.
Never been able to convince Mr. Ford
But you could see here,
of anything.
Mr. Nelson, that would be a great interpretation. I think city staff could have trepidation. It was at least unstriped, as you can see in the top picture here. So,
Is there any other questions from the board?
I got a question, just because of the photo.
Put your microphone on, Doug.
Sorry. How many cars, the photo's funny. Is that just one car deep on the parking in front of the building itself? It looks really long from here.
the parking spots are a little bit longer. They're 20 feet instead of 18 feet.
But it's still one car.
Oh, yeah. These are single car. Yeah.
Okay, is there any other questions?
Only one.
Yes.
Any reason why you really do need a variance from 2015.5, the pavers? You could put pavers in there.
It's most likely a drainage issue here. It would not match the streetscape at all. There are no sidewalks here either. It's an old street. We're just asking to keep it how it was permitted. Those sections are also in there because there are a lot of related code sections in that non-conforming back-out parking spot. We did include all of the ones that were applicable. I think in the agenda, there are some duplicate ones in there, too.
You and your clients won't be safe when you go through the whole process to have the city bless us.
Yes, yes.
I got to tell you, I got a hard time with just not putting the pavers in if you're going to start making the street look better.
Yeah, I mean.
First application does.
Business. I mean, it's.
At least make it decorative, unless there really is some drainage issue, and then they can come back, but I'm fine with the back out parking.
And it
Given the
does cost them
circumstances.
money to come here, so, I mean,
What?
it costs the business money to
Yeah.
ask for this.
And they did spend about
Andrew's doing this for free.
$310,000 in
Yeah, I
improvements.
I don't know if you knew that.
And I think it's a beautiful business, it adds a lot to the city and in the neighborhood. We ought to have more of them and be encouraging this stuff. That's-
So with that in mind, if there's no other questions, do you have a motion, Bob?
Motion to approve the variance.
All of them at once.
Yes. And, well, approve them, is there a way, how do we do this without, verbiage-wise, like Howard wanted to suggest, we just, as a newer.
If I were making the motion, I would split it into two motions, the 1, 2, 3, 4, first four variances.
Okay.
In one motion, and the fifth variance in a second motion.
But before you,
Yeah.
I just have a question.
Sure. Go ahead.
How many parking spaces do you have and how many parking spaces do you need?
13 and 13.
Okay, so if you turn them sideways, how much into your yard would you have to go?
Make them parallel spots or go into the dog park.
Going into the dog park?
I'm not, like, if we made them parallel parking spots,
If you
like
went this
facing-
way, you went this way and this way and this way, you know?
Yeah, you wouldn't have a dog park left, but.
I mean, I don't know, I don't know the sizing, I mean, I don't, if they're 20 feet now,
Okay.
how wide's a spot and how many
Eight,
spots?
Motion approved.
standard spot minimum is 18 feet by 8
And the
feet 8
last one?
inches.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, so you,
What?
gonna ask
You don't understand which one?
Well, I was wondering, we're gonna lump the first four and then do
We can
If that's
do
what
all-
you choose.
We can do all five, but if we do all five, I'm gonna have a hard time
Okay.
voting yes on all five of
Okay.
them.
They cut you off.
I know.
Taking the advice of my colleagues here, I'd like to move to grant the variances for the back out parking of the first four sections of the requested variances, and separate question number
Well,
5.
just leave that alone and
Okay.
just
Make
do
a
a
vote
motion
one
on
at
the
a
first four.
Gotcha, okay.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
it meets the requirements of variance
Because it
under
meets
our
requires the
code.
variance according to code.
Okay, so we have the motion and the second.
Discussion?
Discussion, go ahead, Caldwell.
I have known Fred Strassel for many years. And I see him down there with almost steam coming out of his ears and he has something to say. And before we vote on this issue, I'd really like to see what Fred has to say about the issue. Because I know he's got something. If not, we just go ahead with the vote.
It's up to you, Fred.
I think it's a huge improvement over what's there. I drove that street 3 times today and
Without a
actually
doubt.
parked for 20 minutes to watch what was going on. And I think, I mean, my only comment is that the landscape area against the fence is fairly minor, and that asphalt area between the curb stops and the existing landscaping could have been cut down and a couple of trees put in. I think that would make it look even better. But I'm not disturbed at all about the back out parking on that street. It is a mess.
Yep.
Okay, does that satisfy, Caldwell? Feel good? Okay, why don't you feel good in your first meeting today? All right, so we have a first and a second, and let's take a roll call, Jamie.
Mr. Stressa?
Fred?
Yes. Sorry.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Kent?
Yes.
Mr. Mead?
yes.
And Vice Chair Elfman?
Yes.
Passed
Okay,
7-0.
motion passes. So we have one more.
Mr. Chair, I move to approve request for the variance number 5 as relates to, as it meets the requirements for a variance.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, I'm just going to read what number 5 was, 47-20.15.5.h. Okay. So we have a
Mr.
motion
Chairman,
and a
I
second.
would ask
Discussion.
on the roll call to go last on this vote.
Okay. Then Jamie, we're going to have Howard Nelson go second to last on this vote.
Second to last.
Yes. It's going to be Howard, then Howard. You figure out which one. Is there any further discussion on this one? Okay, in that case, let's call.
Can you read it again? Sorry.
Read.
What are we voting on?
We're voting on.
We separated the
fifth variance.
Paver one.
It's 47-20.15.5.h.
But Fred, going on what you were saying before, this is a huge improvement.
Yeah.
I love the fact that they've done it. I think it's great. I'm fully in favor of the back-out parking variance. But there's no reason for the paver variance outside of I just don't want to spend a little bit more money.
Maybe Andrew can show me where the paving is, because I've been sitting here looking at the,
Where would the decorative pavers go? That might be a Bert Ford question more than anything else.
I can chime in. At this point, if the first variance is approved, there's actually an argument that the pavers might not be required now. The pavers are under the existing non-conforming back-out parking provisions. So we can possibly table this. I'm offering to come back if needed.
Careful, I think you've got a 5-1.
Understood.
Right now.
Understood.
Okay.
Does that get us where we need to be?
yeah.
If we table it,
Okay.
And-
I do a friendly amendment, table the
With that
variance.
second the table.
Okay.
The fifth variance,
Right.
Seven
47.
point dash 20,
What?
point
go
15,
forward
point 15.
Go forward with it?
Yeah.
To allow for decorated papers. And allow council to reappear if so needed.
Whoa,
Although-
wait, I think, do you want to go forward with the
We
variance
can
request?
move, I don't want to take any more of your time next meeting. We can move forward with it.
All right, so go
Okay.
back to your original motion, which I think was seconded by Fred.
Okay, we're going back just to approve,
Yes.
okay? I move to approve the fifth variance regarding backup parking and pavers, if needed.
Okay, do we have a second on that?
Second.
Okay. So now, Jamie, roll call?
Yes. Mr. Stressa?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Messy, but yes.
Mr. Kent?
Yes.
Mr. Mead?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
No,
And Vice Chair Offman?
Yes.
That's your
Pass 6
stupid
to
vote
1.
for the night.
Okay, so
that's why I
Andrew,
wanted to go last.
Andrew, stay comfortable. Looks like we're going to get
Unfortunately,
you
I have the
again.
next one as well.
Okay.
Don't go anyplace.
So, next case, case number 230-40004. Andrew Shine, you're up again. Before you go, Andrew, sorry, I do want to ask for disclosures again.
Disclosures?
So, Bill, any disclosures?
No.
Doug? Howard?
Brief, non-substantive conversation.
Fred?
Site visit?
Brief phone call, no substantive discussion.
Okay, Colba?
Brief discussion, site visit.
Thank you, and there's none for me. Go right ahead.
Good evening, Chair, members of the board. Andrew Shine with Lockery and Chakas here representing the applicant. The property is located at the southwest corner of Northeast 18th Avenue and Northeast 13th Street. It is a townhouse development. We're here for two variance requests. One is for an easement at the rear of the property, and the second is for mechanical equipment screening. This is a close-up of the property. And just to give a little background, the city requires a 5-foot easement behind townhouses when they don't abut a street. This provision was not enforced to the best of its ability during the DRC approval process. And a lot of things were not verified during the DRC approval process, some by the applicant, some by staff, not putting blame on anybody. But this is, there have been a couple of these that have come to the board because of this. And now, new townhouses that are going in are being thoroughly vetted for these easement issues. This is the, if you This is looking from 13th Street south. This is where an easement would supposed to ordinarily be. There is not 5 feet between the gate and the fence. That fence is actually the neighbor's fence.
The wooden fence.
The wooden fence is the neighbor's fence that encroaches onto our property, varying from a 1 foot encroachment to a 3 feet encroachment, depending on where it is. We have reached out to the neighbors to move their fence on their own accord with no success. At this point, I'm sure we could take them to court and probably win. It's an encroachment on this property. But that could take, who knows how long, and at that point, you're now creating quite angry neighbors for the existing residents there. So that's number one, is the fence, our neighbor's fence encroaches into that area, so we can't provide the 5 feet there. The second are those FPL poles. Those FPL poles go down the entire length of the block. You can see dotted in blue, that's where all the poles are. They're all within private property. They are within easements, but they're within private property. It's not an alley back there. In order to remove those poles, not only is it quite the financial undertaking, which I know is not a reason for a variance, but we would have to get cooperation from at least 18 other neighbors. And FPL would need cooperation from those 18 other neighbors to remove those. Because the FPL won't just remove a portion on our section, they have to bury it and move it into the right-of-way. So we can't move the FPL poles, it's out of our control. We can maybe move the fence if we take our neighbors to court, but even if we move the fence, we still can't provide the 5 foot clear easement because the pole is there. So what we're asking is to remove, in my variance request, I did ask to remove the easement area. There is still wiggle room in between the white fence and the FPL pole. It is about 2 feet. If the board is so inclined, we can reduce it to whatever the existing limit there is. But in our request, we did ask to remove it. And the developer is okay personally removing it. They don't live there. It was sold to townhouse unit owners. They still manage the common area at this point until the association is turned over. But all of this back here is common area under our townhouse declaration. So all the residents can still go through that area legally. We're just asking to remove the requirement from the city's ULDR, which is essentially duplicative with the townhouse declaration because of this unique circumstance here. And I think what I would consider a classic hardship, just something that's really completely out of our control. The second variance request is for rooftop mechanical equipment. I was here at the last Board of Adjustment hearing. I hope everyone made it home okay after the flood. And it came with another mechanical equipment variance. This one's a little bit different. The reason for not putting the screening up here is, at this point, aesthetics, bringing more attention to the equipment than is already there. You can see from street view, it's not a very tall development, but from street view, you can't see the equipment in all but one place. This is looking at the corner southwest. You can see this. It's the parapets are raised a bit, not enough to screen it. The city's requirement is screening 6 inches above the highest point of the rooftop equipment. We can't raise the parapets at this point, but it would be possible to add screening around the equipment itself. But again, we would just be drawing attention to it rather than the current condition right now. In the sake of candor, there is one view from one area where you can see the equipment. It is from the north of 13th Street there. You can see it sort of peeking over the west building. Again, the structure can handle that being screened right around it, but it would be, again, drawing more attention to it. So out of all the rooftop equipment, there is one that is slightly visible. And this is looking west from the street view. Those are our two requests. One is the FPL, the pedestrian easement. Again, it's duplicative. It's already in the townhouse declaration to allow residents to go back there. And we have the hardship that's, two hardships really that are just out of our control at this point. And the second is to not draw further attention to the rooftop equipment.
Thank you. Andrew, I'm going to open up the public hearing, and afterwards, I'll bring it back for board questions. So is there anybody from the public that wishes to speak? Okay, in that case, I'm going to close public hearing. I'm going to bring it back to the board for any questions.
Chairman, I've got a couple of
Or
questions.
just a point of clarification. The project was approved, showing 5-foot access and utility easements along the west and the south side. That's how it was approved through the planning department. And the other clarification is that the area to the west is not common area. These are fee simple units, and it's all private property behind there. Just two clarifications.
I need to clean that up a little bit. Bert is correct that the 5-foot access easement was shown on the plans. And that was, after that, there was no verification of either by city or the applicant of the FPL issue and the fence issue. So those came after. As to the common area question, I do have a copy of the townhouse declaration. It is common area. Yes, it is owned fee simple, but there are access easements in the townhouse declaration behind that. So common area doesn't necessarily just refer to something that's owned by an association. You can have common area within a fee simple lot.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I do have a question for
Okay.
Ms. Shine.
As do I.
Andrew, I'm looking in the package at what is the, I guess, alley close-up picture.
Yes.
These townhouses have individual pools, right? How do the pool maintenance guys get their chlorine and all of their equipment back?
There are no gates, no.
So how do they?
Through the house.
Through the house, well, a pool guy would go through the house. For maybe for bigger equipment, they are going to have to go through this area. That's.
And I love my pool guy, but he drips chlorine through my yard every time he comes out.
I'll send you
I can
mine. He's
imagine him dripping it through my house. How do they replace the pool equipment once it runs out or put a pool heater in?
Yeah, it depends what it is. They are going to have to go through this area. It does open up a little bit to the south. It's you got between 2 and 3 feet. Again, not a very large area, but they have to manage.
So these are
we can't-
townhouses with common elements. Is there a possibility of putting side-by-side openable gates to meet the same requirement?
Are you referring to like a gate in the back of, where would this gate be?
The gate would be basically on the side of each property line so that you could get to Unit 3 by opening up the gate in Unit 1 and going across their backyard, opening the gate in Unit 2 and going across their backyard, opening the gate in Unit 3 and going into their backyard.
1 second.
As we pull out the plans. What?
Why would I do that if I own unit number 1 and you own unit number 3? I don't want your pool guy going through my yard.
Yeah, I hear you, but that's
I know.
that's the problem with this.
But that's the thought process, and I don't want him walking through my house either.
We're going to give
I know.
Andrew a
So how do you
chance
get
to
there?
explain that in a minute.
It would cause the removal of at least 6 trees. Could it be done? It still wouldn't meet the code because it wouldn't be in the proper area.
And the meaning behind the code provision, the reason for the code provision, is to be able to get access where there's no street access, and because it's a townhouse, there's no side yards for them to come up. So without it, if heavier equipment, and granted your condensers are and air handlers are up on the roof, but somebody wants to put a pool heater in, unless they got some really strong crews who can lift that above their heads and carry it through that alley and dump it over the fence, that's gonna be tough.
You're with the planning department more than we are, and I see that the brain trust for the planning department's left. Can you explain to the board why they went with this 5-foot easement, which is not the first time this board's had to make a ruling on getting rid of the easement? I mean, the picture that I'm looking at, it's a metal fence that has no gates.
Right.
And it's an area that people, frankly, maybe not the townhouse development, but the people on the adjacent property to the west are going to throw their stuff over the top of the wood fence, and it's going to sit there and rot and be a problem. And for the life of me, I don't quite understand why the planning department insists on these 5-foot easements. And then the developer comes along and puts a fence in that can't be opened up. I mean, it's absurd.
And see, as much as you don't like it, the side-by-side.
Well, depends on whether it's a easement for the user, the homeowners, or an easement for utilities.
Well,
Bit of both.
This one is in particular is an easement only for the homeowners. The easement actually, it's not to the public, not to utility companies, and it's building specific. So the front building doesn't need any easements, but the back building, it would only be easements to the people in that building.
Right.
Who are in support of this application as well, I will say.
you know,
So-
to me, if anybody wants to go in there and peep, it's a great spot. They got a 5-foot walkway that, off the street, that you can get into that area. Nobody can even know you're there. I don't understand why the planning department insists on this.
And at the very least, if we think, and I don't like that alley lit, which is what it turns into, but if you're gonna keep it, at least put openings in the back gate so it meets the intent of the code.
Okay, let's,
The intent of the code is to get access to the backyard where there's no other access without going through the house.
Yeah, and I understand what you're asking. I frankly don't know if we can do it at this point. Those units are now owned in fee simple by others. So we would need their cooperation at this point. Disturbing their newly
If-
bought home for construction, for new construction. And I don't know if we can.
if we vacate the alley tonight, who's going to take care of it?
It's not an alley, actually. It's not an alley. It functions as one.
It's a 5-foot narrow
Yeah.
strip.
Right, that's part of the townhouse ownership.
Right.
Whether
Yes.
it's fee simple under
Whoever
easement or.
maintains the rest of the property has to maintain that
Exactly.
as well.
It's maintained by the same group, and I don't know if they have a contractor at this point, but by the association who maintains all of the other, the entrance
Why do they
driveway.
get the lawnmowers into the backyard?
All-
And please don't tell me going through the house.
They're not that big.
I think we can fit a lawnmower through there.
Okay, I think
Yeah,
there's
but how
some,
do you get in the backyard?
Backyard.
Outside of throwing over the fence.
Yeah, the city, even if we had the 5 feet here, that would be the same question. The city doesn't require gates going to the back of the properties, so it would be the same question whether it's 5 feet or
Okay.
the existing one.
okay, I think
There
there's some
could be
other
a
questions.
deficiency in the code, I don't know.
I think there's some other questions as well. Was there questions to that end, Bob?
I guess in my mind, it just, I was wondering, how would a fire truck, hauling a paramedic get in back there without going through the house?
Well, we don't go through the house.
Through the house.
We'll go through the house.
Yeah, and
But
the kids drowning in the pool.
putting a pool heater
Yeah.
in or, replacing something or even cutting the grass.
That's true. I mean,
I gotta cut it with a
If
weed
you think
whipping.
it's offensive to let side-by-side neighbors go through, wait till you gotta let the lawn crew come in through your house to get to your backyard because they maintain it.
On that point, if I may, this easement is not for emergency services. They can generally just do whatever they want.
Right.
This easement is only for the townhouse unit owners. It doesn't benefit
Be able to
anybody else.
access their backyard.
Correct. It does not benefit anybody else besides these unit owners who, again, are in support of this, so.
We're going to beat this to death. We ready?
Almost. Caldwell, did you have a question?
No, I don't. I mean, this
I have a
problem,
question.
Okay. Go ahead, Doug.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
This looks like a fence. I mean, it looks like a fence in here.
Well, it is.
No, not a fence, I mean a gate. Doesn't that look like a hinge to a gate?
No say.
Any rate,
I don't know.
Okay.
let's go.
Go ahead, Fred. Do you have a
I
motion?
make a
to
motion that we approve the application 47-18.33.B.5.D,
As it meets the
which is
requirements. for-
requesting a variance to remove the 5-foot pedestrian access easement.
As it meets the requirements for a variance under our code?
No, because I think it needs to be
I hear you, I'm just trying to make
finish the
it
motion.
a complete legally defensible motion.
Can we just reduce the requirement down to
Oh,
whatever the
Actually, at the moment, we have a motion.
And a second. to the
I didn't hear a
motion.
second.
I didn't hear a second.
I did. I just seconded it.
Oh, okay. You have to get it out of your head into, got it on the microphone. Thank you. So we have a motion and second. Any further discussion?
I'd like to suggest that we amend to not reduce the 5 feet, not. I recommend that we do not eliminate it, but reduce it.
There's still no access into the units.
Yes, but I'd rather not reduce it so there's nothing. I'd rather just keep what's here as a requirement.
Okay.
Okay.
Where are we here?
So right now, we
Got
have
a
a
motion and a second
second.
if the motion maker wants to take the modification.
I don't. Let's get rid of it.
I don't. Let's vote it.
Okay. Then in that case, go ahead, Jamie.
Okay,
This is
Jamie.
just on the first one?
Just on the first one.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Stressa?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
No.
Mr. Kent?
Yes.
Mr. Mead?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
No.
Vice Chair Elfman?
Yes.
Yes?
Passed 5-2.
So now we go on to the second one.
Honestly, the placement of the structures in the middle kind of negates the screening issue, so I would make a motion to approve the second one in that there's no practical effect that would require the additional screening. And therefore meets the requirements of the variance under our code.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
Yeah.
Discussion.
Please.
How do we get to this point where we have these structures in the middle of the building with no screening? That it's here before the Board of Adjustment?
Existed when they designed the building.
So under the existing code, when it was designed,
That's right.
they were clear?
Ignored it.
Okay.
Okay, asked and answered. Any further discussion? Okay, let's take a roll call, please.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Kent?
Yes.
Mr. Mead?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Stressa?
No.
And Vice Chair Elfman?
Yes.
6-1.
Okay.
Thank you
I
all.
think you're done for the
Andrew,
moment.
before you leave,
I did enjoy that, no.
just for a little more chit chat before you walk out the door.
Yes, Mr. Stressa.
You guys are building another project that is similar on the north side of 13, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Does the current design screen the mechanical equipment on the roof?
Yes, sir.
It does.
Yes.
So you've learned.
The developer learned.
Okay.
Perhaps you should take a 5-foot tape measure.
I hope we won't see you come back on that one.
Okay,
At this point,
If you do, give it to Robert.
I would have to refer to another attorney at this point,
Yes,
yes.
exactly.
Andrew, you're okay. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Next case. Case number 23030004. Any respondents? Yes. Okay. Good evening.
Oh, my.
Thank you.
I don't have a PowerPoint. But I do have
That's
this.
okay. This is much better for people my age than a PowerPoint.
Thank you.
Okay, and before we have you speak and introduce yourself, I'd like to have disclosures.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Claude
Sir,
Larry.
before you
Yes.
start, I'm going to have disclosures from the board.
Have you got another one of these for the young lady taking a tenant?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so any disclosures, Bill?
No.
Doug?
No.
Howard?
None.
Fred?
None.
Colba?
Been to the site.
Thank you, and none for myself. Yes, sir, I'm sorry, if you could please reintroduce your name and your address.
Okay, good evening, everyone. My name is Claude Paré. I'm the owner of 808 Southwest 22nd Terrace. And tonight, we're requesting a freestanding shade structure variance. One is for the height, where we have a 14.6 feet in height, where the code allows only a 12-foot
height. So the request is for 2.6 feet in height. And we're also requesting a variance to allow the structure to have an area of 383.52 square feet, whereas the code requires a 200 square feet. So a variance request for 183.52 square feet. So if you look at the picture, we have this beautiful tiki hut in our backyard, and it's a little bigger and a little larger than the code. So we're just asking if you allow the variance.
Okay, and I'm sorry, sir, because I did forget to ask this. Were you sworn in earlier?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, is there any questions from the board first?
I've got a couple of quick questions.
Go ahead, Howard.
Mr., is it Pare?
Yes.
Mr. Pare, who built your tiki hut for you?
Seminole Tiki Hut.
Very good. And you've got a tribal registration number?
Yes. I submitted all the paperwork to the city.
And you're not asking, there's no electricity in there?
Nothing.
And you're not asking for a side yard setback variance?
No.
Because you don't need one? Got it. Those are all my questions.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else from the board have any questions? Okay, I'm going to open up to the public. Is there anybody, a member of the public that wishes to speak on this? Okay, seeing none, close the public hearing, bring it back to the board for a motion.
Discussion.
Okay, we can discuss first. Go ahead.
I went to the site. I don't know how many other people did. And listen, it's well-maintained home, beautiful structure. This has nothing to do with the homeowner, but this case is before us tonight. And I do not want to get into a precedent-setting vote tonight, although our board attorney will tell us the items we vote on are precedent-setting, so on and so forth. I've been down this road. There are many, many, many tiki structures within our city. And when you stand back on the street, as beautiful as this home's maintained, as beautiful as the structure is, you can clearly see this tiki hut sticking well above the roof of the house. And what we're getting ready to vote on tonight, I'm going to tell you is precedent setting, because if we allow this, we're going to allow the other hundreds around the city and say it's okay. We don't have electric today in there. We don't have plumbing in there today. But I know where these lead to. And I understand what the homeowner's trying to do. And I'm up here trying to be the anti-tiki hut jerk. Okay? I understand what he's trying to do. But we have codes for a reason. I think we need to follow them. And this is hat in hand of, hey, how do I continue to have what I have? Because I love what I have, but we didn't get a permit and we didn't do it by code when we did it. That's all I want to say about the issue. I just don't want this to be a precedent-setting item. I'm concerned about it. Thank you.
I hear you, and let me tell you my concern about a different precedent. The position of municipalities in South Florida with respect to tribally built chicky huts that do not have additional elements such as electricity or plumbing or things that are tribally built in a tribal manner is, as long as they meet the zoning setback requirements, they don't meet code requirements. That changes if you put electricity in them and they now need to meet freestanding structure requirements. I don't think we've got jurisdiction on the size or height of a chicky hut that is tribally built, as long as it's within the zoning setbacks. By law, I don't think we do.
We had that discussion, what,
It
6
ch-
months ago?
Actually, I think-
It changes if you add electricity,
Yeah, correct.
if you add anything else, it becomes a freestanding structure. That's at least my reading of the code as a land use attorney.
Good
Okay,
thing
so
we have a board attorney.
so before we go on, I'm going to have Rhonda speak, who kept on grabbing at the microphone. Go ahead, Rhonda.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Rhonda Montoya Hassan with the City Attorney's Office. Actually, this issue was raised a little bit in advance by Mr. Stressow. And so the Florida statutes actually only addresses the exemption of tiki huts from Florida Building Code regulations expressly. Again, as you all have recognized, unless electrical planning, mechanical is put into it, and then, of course, the FBC would come into play. It does not limit the city, a municipality, or any governmental entity's ability to not enforce zoning codes. So it would be all zoning codes, I would suggest, not just setbacks. Now, there may be the typical practice of municipalities only enforcing as to setbacks. That's a different issue, but the law exempting tiki huts only relates to the Florida Building Code. It does not say that the municipality can only look at setbacks. It's silent on that. All it discusses is that the Florida
So
Building
just for
Code.
the purposes of discussion, a local government who wanted to get rid of tribal chicky huts in their municipality could pass a purely zoning code resolution that prohibited chicky huts of more than 2 feet in height and more than 2 feet in diameter.
Perhaps.
But the
Okay.
city has not.
The city has not. I just think it's a workaround of the statutory exemption given to the tribe.
It's the following buildings, structures, and facilities are exempt from the Florida Building Code as provided by law, and any further exemptions shall be as determined by the legislature and provided by law. Chicky huts constructed by the two tribes set forth in the statute just exempts them from Florida Building Code permits, does not exempt them from any zoning.
Good luck with this legislature changing this.
Well, we're worried about tonight. So
do we have a motion, or do we have further discussion? Take either.
And
Well,
again, the clarification is that certainly this board has the authority to grant the exemption, but I don't think it's, I don't think.
Or to deny.
Or to deny, of
Right.
course, certainly. But I think the board also has the ability to look at all the applicable zoning codes as it applies to this structure.
Actually, it's probably more proper, Mr. Chair, that we probably should have had a motion before we discuss, right?
No, not necessarily, but I'm happy to make a motion.
Okay.
I would move that we approve the two variances as requested as they meet the requirements for a variance under our code.
And I will second.
Okay, and is there any further discussion before we take a roll call? Seeing none? Jamie?
Mr. Cooper?
I'm sorry, but no.
Mr. Kent?
Yes.
Mr. Mead?
No.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Stresser?
no.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Vice Chair Elfman?
Yes.
Thank you.
Doesn't matter.
4-3.
Failed anyways.
Okay. Sorry, sir.
Right. Right, does not meet the supermajority requirements. Which means the chicky would need to be rebuilt to be 2 feet lower and roughly half its size.
You know, no, not getting into it.
Okay. We need to move on to our next case.
So what happened now?
It failed. You did not get the variance. Yes, Fred?
Let me have you. He's going to want them back, I'm sure.
There you go, sir.
Okay, moving on to the next case. Case number 230-40005. Brian Anderson, respondent.
Right now, I'm kidding.
Always coming up, I'll take disclosures. Bill, we'll start with you. Any disclosures, Bill?
Bill?
Any disclosures?
I'm sorry, no.
Doug?
No.
Howard?
No.
No.
Fred? No. Colbo?
Been to the site,
Thank you. None for me.
Sorry, we went 8 or 9.
We're on 8.
Thank you.
Okay, sir, have you been sworn in?
Yes.
Okay, then please state your name and relation to the property.
I'm Brian with Broward County Fence, and I'm representing Mr. Bizzano. He's the homeowner, and he's going to speak after me.
Okay.
Basically, we're here to request a variance across the dock to prevent people, kids, dogs, including Airbnb strangers, people on vacation, from going from Mr. Bizzano's house to the neighbor's house and vice versa. So that's pretty much it, just a fence across the dock to prevent access from strangers, people's dogs, and kids. in this typical situation, he owns the dock where most of the time the homeowners do not own the dock. It goes up to the seawall, but all the fence that would be installed would be within the property lines. So that's a unique situation for this property, and I feel that would be a good thing to have the fence there. And I'd like to put this over with Mr. Bizzano and have him talk.
Okay. Mr. Bizzano, I just want to verify you have been sworn in?
Oh, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
This is awkward. Hi, I'm Robert Bizzano, 2160 Tambark Lane, and I'm trying to reestablish my property lines. The adjacent property is being used as an Airbnb. The people on those properties on those weekends, which usually is like Thursday to Monday, are entering my property, walking right in behind my house. Some of them smoke marijuana. They have drink cups in their hand, which they just litter all around. And when we go out there and ask them what they're doing there, they're going, "We're having a nice walk on the dock. What's the problem?" I'm in no position to defend myself, so I'm just trying to establish this. Also, recently, I've got a 95-year-old father who just had a stroke 6 weeks ago. I inherited a 100-pound dog that can easily go over to that property, and then he gets all muddy and dirty. Washing a dog in my situation is tough. And I just wanted to establish my property lines and keep my father in the property and keep the others out of my property.
Okay, thank you. Does anyone have any questions for the applicant?
I do.
Okay, Caldwell, please.
I noticed from the aerial photos and the photos that were given to us in our packet, it looks like at some time the docks were connected by a sheet of plywood or some type of wood, that your neighbor's dock was connected to your dock.
No, sir.
Okay, that's how it appears. And then I noticed that at least 2 pilings on your neighbor's dock are covered with a PVC pipe along with all the other pilings on your dock. I found that.
Those are my pilings on my property.
So
It's a unique property where my property goes in and around the structure. I can show you if you have the survey in front of you.
I do, and I guess that's where there was some confusion on my part of, it appeared that your dock went further than your property, and that's what I didn't
No,
understand.
my property goes further than it appears.
Right, but that's
Yeah,
water.
looks like the property line kind of juts over at the seawall.
I see.
But that's your property following the water that juts over there, not land.
My dock is my property and my water is not my property. It's a strange, unique situation.
But you want to really essentially put a fence where the neighbor is looking at it.
But when we moved in, there was a fence there to begin with. We took it down because the relationship that I had with that neighbor was easier, and I didn't have a 100-pound Labrador retriever, nor a father with a stroke that I'm trying to keep him in my property without wandering. And then the Airbnb is just a whole other issue because almost without any weekends being skipped, that house, people have occupied, they occupy the property with no regard to noise, property lines, or just behaving themselves.
Okay, is there any other questions from the board?
Yeah, I've got one.
Okay, Fred?
I remember looking at this and regretted not being able to go out there and knock on the door and go look.
You're welcome to come there.
The property line appears to go to the edge of the dock,
Yes, sir.
and...
Actually, 2 inches
And there's a
beyond.
seawall underneath the edge of that dock?
On the inside, yes, but not on the outside where the poles are at. There's
Okay,
markers.
because it says set a nail with a metal cap. I guess they set that in the wood deck?
The wood deck, because they can't set
That's
it.
kind of unusual.
Yeah, they can't set it in the water because my property actually goes out 2 inches beyond. But-
Okay.
So in the setback, you'll see that it shows that.
So, and Fred, so is there like an 11 by 7 foot, you just own over the?
Piece of dock that's
Right, that's owned by him, that's in his property over just
over the water.
Yes, sir.
That's where I was confused.
Yeah, and I'm still confused as to how that happened, but that is what it is.
It is what it is.
So,
When
right.
I brought the property about 25 years ago from the Ricks, that's how they wanted it deeded.
Okay.
Because they knew you'd have to come to us for a variance for a fence sometime in the future.
Well, but the funny part is, there was a fence there when I bought it from the Ricks.
Fred, has your question been answered? Because I got a question for staff.
Go.
Bert, what's the code provision, or at least the reason behind the code provision that would prevent him from putting a fence up here? What's the purpose of that code provision?
I don't know, I wasn't around when it was written, but the code does specifically say that the only thing that can be built on a dock is a mooring device, can be installed on it, is a mooring
I'm sorry,
device,
is a
like a
what?
boat lift or a davit or things like that. I think it's primarily for the ones that are in the right-of-way.
Got it.
You know, there are a few of these docks that the properties do extend beyond the seawalls, and it's on there, and, you know, and the dock is literally on their property instead of the right-of-way, but there aren't any provisions in our code to distinguish the two, and it rarely happens. So it is a
We're
unique
worried about
thing.
not setting a precedent. I can't imagine a piece of property that's this unusual.
I've got a quick, just,
Go ahead, Bob.
condominium, where I lived in Fort Lauderdale, every dock had fences on their property, in my condo area. I mean, we all had gates, you know, you couldn't go to the next condo, through docks without permission, or the gate being unlocked, or, I mean, I
That's
lived
kinda
in
interesting.
And, you know, Bayview and 49th, all those condos, or have gates, or fences, you can't go from. one
In
property
between the dock spaces?
Out to the edge of the dock. In between, the property yards. You know,
Yeah, to keep you from walking.
yeah, I couldn't go to the next door property because there's a fence there and a door.
There's numerous times we've done it too.
Yeah,
on docks.
I mean, it's all over.
I have a question, Mr. Chair, for the property owner.
Yes, go ahead.
Yes, sir.
In the application, it says chain link fence.
I think the reason I put that in there is because at least the neighbor could see through it. So I wasn't trying to block vision. I'm just trying to establish a safety clause within my property and also the
I don't know
privacy
that
of
you
my
need to be
property.
that nice.
The reason I asked the question is I saw your house from the front.
You can't have a
You have a
fence
beautiful piece
10
of
feet of
property, really
waterway.
well maintained, and I'd hate to see an eyesore from the waterway, and I'm kind of feeling the temperature of the board down here, and most of these gentlemen I don't know. But if they were to approve it tonight, could we do something a little nicer than a chain link? And I'm not saying a plastic fence where nobody can see through, but maybe a
Or a
horizontal
stucco
rail.
wall or something, but just
A
something a little
horizontal
nicer.
rail, something a little more decorative that would be appealing from the waterway that would complement your house.
Before you
take-
answer, sir, I think the city also has something they may want to add to that, Bert.
And just a clarification, that would be another variance, because there's a code section that says anyone on the waterway, the fence cannot extend the last 10 feet to the property line for the very reason for allowing the neighbors visual rights through to the waterway. So when a fence is built along the side property line to the waterway, the last 10 feet to the property line have to be 75% non-opaque.
Right.
Everywhere in the
okay.
city, that's a code
So that
section,
kills an
everywhere in the
otherwise
city.
good idea.
Right, so technically this wall is not proper.
And again, that would have to be a separate variance.
An aluminum picket fence.
That's 70% non-opaque.
Yeah.
We consider aluminum picket fence 75%
Can you do something like that?
non-opaque.
Yeah, we can use aluminum. The horizontal wouldn't meet pool code. So one other reason for extending the barrier is to keep kids from crawling between property lines.
Right, would
So
you,
with the code, the chain link meets pool code, it's see-through, 75%.
okay,
Then vertical aluminum would work.
Would work?
It would.
would,
Not horizontal. But however, they both are equally 75%.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a motion for you if you're ready.
can we not motion yet?
Sure.
Give
Go ahead,
me a sec. What, would you be opposed to just putting the fence between your wall and the first pile and not?
And letting them have the
and
other
let-
piece of
Let them
dock.
have the other, you don't
I
have,
would not like to give my property
you don't
away.
have to give your property away, it's just your fencing.
You're just giving your property away.
Yeah.
And you don't have to give your property away, but keep giving his property
There might be a
away.
liability.
That's his dock.
He wants to follow the property line.
Yeah, Caldwell's right. Caldwell,
Liability issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's somebody else's property, or his property. Yeah. Good thought, though. Anything else, or do we want to make a motion?
I've got a motion, but, yes, sir.
Chair,
Maybe to make it
did we open it for public discussion?
You know what, I have not yet, but that's probably a good idea before we move forward. Is there anybody from the public wish to speak? Yes, if you could please come forward. Thank you for the reminder.
Tell me this is the Airbnb owner.
And also, sir, while walking,
I wouldn't give it away yet.
sir, while walking up here, have you been sworn in yet?
You're fine where you're
Okay.
at.
If you could please state your name and your address.
Hello, board. My name is Gunnar Barkham. I'm the homeowner at 2150 Tambark, right next door to the applicant.
Okay, thank you.
So the pictures that you're receiving now are basically how this fence issue has developed from a lattice work fence, which was about 4 years ago, to a nice aluminum fence that we both invested in, the homeowner of 2150 and the applicant. And now it's become what you see there is a chain link, upside down chain link fence, which is not in the spirit of what homeowners should be doing as neighbors, but I'm here to basically say that I don't think it's appropriate. We've had discussions. This has kind of become a predatory situation because of something completely separate from a fence. And it shows in the application, there's code enforcement issues with this homeowner that has kind of materialized into an issue between homeowner disputes, essentially, between neighbors.
Anything else to add?
The homeowner dispute, basically, I purchased the property about a year ago in May of 2022. In November of 2022, I had received a letter saying, would you give permission to allow pilings to be put on your property after he had installed a lift that was permitted to be on the riverside, but then he put it on my property, which, as you guys already can see from the permit or the survey is kind of jig-jagged. It goes towards my property, goes back to the water, and then goes back out. And I own the property that's over the water. The dock is partially over land and over the water. It's covering the seawall, as you guys were discussing before. So it's just a very unique situation. And we've allowed, based on city code, which you would not be able to have a boat on property line. It has to be a setback of 10 feet. We've allowed, and there's also an easement, which is a civil matter, not a code matter, but to have his boats docked up on his dock, which seems reasonable, as long as it doesn't impede on our ingress egress, which now it is impeding on our ingress egress. So that's a whole nother dispute. But this whole thing has materialized because he's not able to have his lift on my property, and I wouldn't sign off on it. So now it's become a predatory issue, and it just seems unfair to the public and to me as a homeowner, recent homeowner to the city of Fort Lauderdale.
Okay, and I have a feeling that we may have some on the board that may have some questions for you.
Sure.
So does anybody from the board have any questions?
I might have a couple.
Okay.
Yeah, go ahead. I know you're not bashful.
What?
Go ahead, jump in.
Go jump in. Sir, do you have an objection, notwithstanding the design of the fence, let's leave the design of the fence alone, to him fencing off along his property line there?
Previously, there was, from my understanding, there was a chain link fence that was 3 feet or 4 feet, so it wasn't obstructing anyone's view. I'd rather not, obviously. It's been fine. He doesn't need to use that property, his part of the dock, just like he's been using my part of the land. It's kind of been a known thing between homeowners. But if he's not willing to let us have access to that, just a normal lot line, which should have been drawn differently. I don't know what happened, obviously, when that was created. But then we're going to be enforcing him not being able to use our property to park his boat. So
completely different issue
outside
of our purview, not our dock.
I'm against. I want him to park his boat on my property. I have no problem with that. But then I do have a problem with the fence. So if I have to have a fence, that would be my discussion with him as a homeowner in terms of this variance and not objecting to it.
Okay. And you said a couple questions, Howard?
Well, it boiled down to one question.
Okay. Thank you, Fred. You have a question?
Yeah, I guess Caldwell is correct, I believe, in the fact that if the fence were to run out straight as an extension of the block wall, that there is a piece of dock that actually belongs to him that he needs to maintain in a safe condition unless somebody were to fall through it. So the fact that he wants to fence in that portion of the
His
dock, which
property.
is under his property line, I think makes sense. And I personally would like to see the two of you get together and put a fence in there that's acceptable to you and looks better than a chain link fence, but I'm not gonna get into an argument between you two guys.
Well, before the motion goes in, I'm going to ask for a proffer on fence style along what we were talking about, vertical aluminum. If we get that, I'm happy to make a motion moving forward.
Okay, before you do, let's see if there's any further questions. Caldwell, you're lit up?
I just had a quick question, sir.
Yes,
What
sir.
do you live in a house? What is the primary use of the house?
Currently, it was a vacation rental. It's no longer a vacation rental, and I'm going to be moving over. The flood kind of messed up my plans to move over and be a permanent
There's
resident of
the
Fort
crux of
Lauderdale.
the
So we're
problem.
currently working on remediation of the house to finalize and make sure that I'm able to live in it. But right now, it's not being.
That's the crux of the problem, right there.
So you're going to be
Vacation.
permanently moving into the house we're discussing?
Yes, 2150 is owned by me,
I know-
and I'm going to be a resident of the city of Fort Lauderdale. Yes.
Permanent?
Yes. Well, until I sell the property, but yes.
Okay, understood. Thank you.
I got a question about the docks.
Go ahead, Doug.
It just looks like the dock on this side of the block wall is continuous with your dock and not the same design as your dock.
Yeah, I can help you with that. During the remodel after we purchased it, I got a call from his agent.
Hang on for just a second. You're
just
gonna
gonna
get
need
the
to have your report.
microphone
We're going to get a
back.
microphone over to you.
I cautioned him not to take it from me because I knew this was gonna come up.
During after the sale was made, the new owner decided to redo his dock. So I got a phone call from his agent saying, do you mind if we put new wood on your dock so that it all looks new? I said, no, I don't care because I'm working on my dock as well. When I got home, I found that they kept the same level coming across instead of dropping down like it was. I chose not to argue that point. I knew this was gonna be coming further to ask for a fence. You'll have to excuse me. And so that's how I left it. But yes, it is all on the same level as his dock because without me knowing it, they put wood at the same level instead of continuing my dock through. And when I got home, I found a ramp there, which I have a problem with ramping as it is.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask the applicant for a proffer on fence design if they would like to.
Before you
Something-
do, I just want to see if there's any other questions. Any other questions of the board? Okay.
Something other than a chain link fence, just to protect, because you guys have all sorts of issues you can iron out between the two of you that we're not going to get involved
Don't
in.
get us involved with it.
But the concept of making sure that it doesn't look like an eyesore from Waterward is important to the board.
Just my comment is that Fort Lauderdale allows chain link now
Got it?
10 feet to the water.
And you're asking for a variance for something which I think several board members have said is kind of unsightly. So before we take a vote, would you guys like to proffer?
What if we paint the chain link to a color?
No, chain link is chain link. There's no way to hide it.
Lipstick on a pig.
I fully understand why you're trying to protect your dock and your home.
And appreciate it, right.
I think you're right, but I don't think he deserves to have to look at a chain link fence when in fact it's not allowable by code
Or in that location.
in that location. And I think we're trying to offer some other,
How would you offer to help me designate where my property begins and ends?
no, I
No,
think
he's
where you're
asking for the
designated is
style.
fine.
Aluminum.
We're just
it's-
saying, would you consider a different type of fence?
I'd like to hear it, yes.
So we can offer up aluminum.
Aluminum vertical slat that still meets the pool code?
Correct.
And still meets the,
75% see-through, yes.
in that case, Mr. Chairman, I've got a motion, if you're ready.
Hold on, the motion maker, just one request,
Sure.
that we put a height on that, and I don't think 6 foot would be appropriate. If max height on that fence, the purpose of this fence is to designate a property.
Right.
To stop people walking through, just a physical barrier. To
Okay,
stop
then-
joggers from jumping through,
Then
and
it
then we're on the
needs,
same page.
then it
If I
needs,
could-
it
could I-
needs to be the same height as the block wall.
I was gonna ask that, this dog that I've acquired won't be able to clear that fence. but he definitely can clear a 4-foot, I know that for a fact.
No, but the block wall must be,
Probably close to 5 feet off the
yeah,
dock.
I mean, if he can jump the wall, then he can jump the fence, so let's get on with it tonight.
Okay, so I think we've asked all the questions. We could put the microphone
I
back.
want to make sure the proffer includes a height limitation at the height of the block wall.
Okay.
And needs to be verbal.
Ask
Head-
Bert.
Yeah, head nod doesn't go on the record.
Ask Bert if he's comfortable with what you're gonna do,
Yes, so
because
sir,
he's ultimately gonna have to permit it.
as the property owner?
Yes, sir.
Yes, meaning that you
Okay, I
agree?
have no problem putting a fence to the top of the block wall and the aluminum that he's asking for.
And the top of the block wall is how tall?
5.5 feet.
It is whatever it is.
Okay, got it.
The dog's a jumper.
It's the height of the chain link.
Well, he's just a very active animal.
Okay. So, actually, if we could put the microphone back too, that would be great. Okay, Howard, make your motion.
Mr. Chairman, based upon the proffer of fence type and height relating to the height of the existing block wall, I make a motion to approve the variances requested because it meets the requirements for the issuance of a variance under our code.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion in a couple seconds. Who did that second first? Caldwell, he had the microphone on.
That's
Okay,
fine.
you can take care of the roll call, Jamie.
Chair, can I just ask, did you vote yet? You didn't vote yet, right? Now, you're not approving the wall to extend into that last 10 feet, correct?
No, I'm sorry, Bert, I didn't hear that.
I said, you guys were talking about a wall?
No,
5
the
foot
fence
wall?
height is set to the height of that block
Okay,
wall.
all right, thanks.
We good? Okay, Jamie?
Did you include the bit about it being aluminum vertical and not chain link?
Howard, you didn't make that in your motion, as far as the type of. Fence.
Aluminum vertical.
I
not
made
chain
it
link.
subject to the two proffers. One, the type of fence being aluminum vertical slat with 70% porosity, and the height being set to the height of the block wall.
Okay.
Okay.
No
you-
higher than the height of the block.
Are you in agreement with that, your second, Caldwell?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay. We
Okay,
have that.
ready? Mr. Kent?
Yes.
Mr. Mead?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Dressar?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Elfman?
Yes,
Pass
Okay.
7-0.
thank you all.
Mr. Chairman, can we take a
We have,
2-minute break?
you know what, if you need a 2-minute break, let's take,
I just need a cookie.
let's
And
take a
they're over
2-minute
there,
break.
I'm
I
over
need some
here.
water.
Cookie, I need a cookie, man. When you get older.
Sorry, we're back on. Everybody seated? Great. Going to read the next case, case number 230-50003. Stephanie Toothaker. Let's first go into disclosures. We're going to start with you, Bill. Any disclosures? Bill? Okay, Doug?
No.
Howard?
A brief, non-substantive conversation with Ms. Toothaker.
Okay.
Site visit?
Brief telephone conversation.
Caldwell?
Longer telephone conversation with council and been to the site.
Okay, and I've also been to the site and had a conversation with council.
Ah, see? Ah, see?
Okay.
Coming
Well, thank
out of, coming out of the woodwork now.
And in additional, we all received letters which are in the file. So, Stephanie, I'll let you go on.
Good evening, Board. Stephanie Toothaker on behalf of the applicant, and I'm sorry to keep you all here after the snack break. Hopefully it won't be too long. So I represent 23 Isla Bahia Drive LLC, and the builder, Danny Minkin, is here with me this evening. We are asking for a variance from the side yard setback, and I'm going to explain a little bit about what that means. The side yard does require 25 feet. We actually do exceed that amount with a buffer, but a portion of that is actually public right-of-way, even though it doesn't appear that from the eye. So this is the property. I know a lot of you said you did a site visit. So this is 23 Isla Bahia. There is an existing home on the site, and the existing home is in the exact location where the proposed home is supposed to go on the side that we're asking the variance for. So as I said, we are asking for a variance from section 47-530 to allow it's technically a corner yard setback because of the way it sits on the corner, where we're asking for a setback of 16 feet, where the code requires a corner yard setback of 25 feet, for a total variance of 9 feet. The standard 25-foot setback leaves a buildable area that's actually less than the 40% lot coverage that's required by code. So that's one of our justifications. And we do believe this is the minimum variance that would be necessary to allow the lot to be built on. And it does meet all the other setback requirements. This is the existing home on the site. I think one of you told me that you were familiar with the house. I think in speaking with some of the neighbors, I think they're quite happy to see this house go. And Mr. Minkin and his partner have actually built a lot of homes in the Harbor Beach neighborhood that have been really, really well received. I think a lot of the neighbors were happy to know that they were going to be building on this lot. And obviously it's in need of improvement. This is actually, I'm going to stop here on this picture. I want to show you in this picture, if you can see this large tree here that you can see. This was actually a subject of conversation with one of the neighbors. I think there was a misunderstanding that perhaps it was our intention to remove that tree when in fact that tree is staying. That tree and another significant tree that's on another piece of the property, and I'll show you that in plan view. So this is the existing home that's on the lot. And I want to point out to you that the home sits, it varies very slightly, but the existing home sits 15.9 feet from the property line in one place and 15.8 feet from the property line in another place. And you can very clearly see here that it's the swale, it's the city's swale. It's right of way on paper, but when you look at it in the location, it's actually a very heavily landscaped swale. And together, the existing setback from the property line and the swale width together create what appears to be a setback, a landscaped buffer area that is 26.1 to 27.1 feet. So on paper, and this is existing. This is the existing condition here. And for the proposed property, it's actually a slight improvement even over what is there today. So the property line to the house is 16 feet. The swale width is 10.3 to 11.2. It varies obviously as you go up and down the property. And so from the pavement to the home, the actual buffer area is between 26.3 and 27.2. And this is we're showing you here on this where that lays. So you've got the 16 feet from the home to the property line, which is here. But the swale area actually goes much further than that, and the edge of pavement is here. So the swale buffered area is actually 27.2 at the bottom and 26.3 at the top. This is just a plan view of our landscaping plan. And so in speaking with some of the neighbors, I think what they were very happy to learn that the two large existing trees that are on the site today are proposed to remain. So you can see those are the very large, the darker green circles. There's no variance being requested on Isla Bahia Drive. The only variance that we're requesting is on Harborage Drive, but both of those trees are remaining. And in fact, we do have other existing trees that are all proposed to remain. This is a pretty heavily wooded site in terms of the landscaping, and in fact, we are adding to the landscaping. So the overall landscaping for the proposed home is actually even lusher than what's there today. The existing tree that is to remain on Harborage actually makes up about 25% of that side of the property, where we're requesting the variance. So it actually covers such a large portion of the property, and I've got another image that I'm going to show you. There are palms that are being proposed at the corner intersection because it's a site triangle, so that's obviously a little different than what's there because some of the trees actually block the site triangle. So you can see this is another image looking down Harborage Drive. So you can see those two big trees, the one that's on Harborage Drive and the one that's on Isla Bahia. Those are both being preserved as part of the new home. So we looked at also like what are the other conditions in the area as we looked at this variance. And the only other home that's like this home, that's situated like this home, that's on Harborage Drive, actually has the exact same condition as it relates to the variance that's being requested. So as I said, the request is for a 9-foot variance. Although the 9 feet is still shown as landscaping, it's in the public right-of-way. On side of the street, it's the exact same situation. So this home, the home that's on 27 Isla Bahia, that home just built a second floor addition quite recently. That home is also much closer to they don't meet what I'm trying to say is that they don't meet the 25-foot setback either. It looks like it does, but because they have public right-of-way on their side as well, some of it's landscape, that's also the formal entrance to their garages, so it's a little bit different. But they have only 14 feet between the house and their property line, whereas we're asking for 16 feet to the house. And as one of our closer neighbors, they also wrote a letter of support for this variance. So you can see, again, just now that I've showed you that house is just situated a little differently, so they don't have the level of landscaping that we're proposing for. So this house, the entrance to this house would be on Isla Bahia, not on Harborage, whereas their garages face Harborage. And again, that's just a different image of that house, and that is, of course, one of the letters of support that we submitted. So we do believe that there are unique special conditions that apply to this property. Number one, the combination of the increased rear setback, the fact that it's a corner lot, and the swale outside the property are all special conditions that make it difficult to construct a building that complies with 25 feet on the water, 25 foot on the corner, and the rear yard setback all reduce the buildable area. In fact, this is a zoning district that only requires, every other house in the area only requires a 10-foot setback on each side. What makes this unique is that it's on the water on one side and it's a corner yard on the other side. So it has a much larger setback requirement than all the other homes in the area, except for the one that I just showed you across Harborage. We do believe the circumstances that cause the special conditions, including adjacency to the waterway, the corner nature, and the presence of the large swale are unique to this property and the property on the other side, which has the exact same condition with the setback. So it's not like every other home, and I don't believe it would set a precedent because there's no other home that's situated like this other than the one that I showed you. Literal application of the ULDR, we believe, would deprive the applicant of a property right that is enjoyed by other folks in the neighborhood for all the reasons that I've already enumerated. And the hardship is caused by the physical characteristics of this particular site. So we do believe that we are asking for the minimum variance that allows this property to be built. And again, it is also consistent with what's there today, and it is preserving the trees that we understand were important to the neighborhood. So we don't believe it creates any adverse impacts, and we do have a large number of letters of support. I want to start with this one. I think some of you may have received originally a letter of objection from one of the neighbors that lives on the other side of Harbridge Drive. I did spend a good deal of time with the attorney that represents that property owner. And once they understood the situation, they withdrew their letter of objection. They and actually sent not only a letter withdrawing their objection, but sent a letter in support of the application. And we did enter into this letter agreement with them that lays out some conditions, which basically says that we agree to seek no greater variance than the application that's already before you this evening, which is the 9 feet. And that we would maintain the existing landscaping. And I mentioned that a couple times, and I showed you pictures of that. They also looked at our proposed landscape plan, and we're happy with that. And we attached that to this letter as an exhibit of what the proposed landscaping is. So they did send a letter of support. We also received letters of support from all the houses that I've outlined in yellow. 1 Isla Bahia, 5 Harbridge Isle Drive, 11 Harbor Isle, 27 Isla Bahia, 31 Isla Bahia, 65 Isla Bahia, and 2520 Del Lago Drive. And all of those are in your packet. And this is the letter of support from the neighbor that had originally submitted an objection. And the other ones, these are just the letters that go with the aerial that I just showed you. And that is the conclusion of my presentation. I thank you for your time and your consideration, and we're happy to answer any questions.
We're going to take some questions from the board first. I'm sorry, Doug, was that you? Go ahead. Microphone, Doug.
I believe it's a 2-story house. Yes? 3. It's a 3-story house.
So how high, so you're going,
It's the maximum, which is 35 feet.
so you want to be 9 feet closer and 30 feet?
The house goes like this. So it tiers in as it goes to meet the site drawing.
It's Harbor Beach. It's pretty consistent with the homes in the neighborhood. They're not small.
Chairman, I've got one question.
Go ahead.
I just want to make sure I'm very clear on the record. The existing house that is standing there today that is going to be demoed is closer to the property line than what your proposed new house will be.
That's correct. It's by a very small amount.
Couple of
Yes.
inches.
Yes, it's a
right.
couple of inches,
But
yes.
still, you're not increasing
That's correct.
the
We're not increasing.
nonconformity, you're
No.
decreasing it. And I also have a question for staff.
Go ahead.
And it's a building permitting question more than the zoning question. My memory, which often proves incorrect, was that if during the demolition, they were to keep the non-conforming setback walls in place, they wouldn't need a variance on the new building. They just have a new house with 2 crappy old walls.
Now, once you demo 50% of the building, you have to come into full compliance.
Okay.
With both the Florida Building Code and the ULDR.
Got it.
I have a question, Stephanie. So with the setbacks, the home that was built beforehand, because I know you said that you were pretty much on the same footprint, did that get a variance originally to be able to be that close?
I don't think any of these homes received variances. I think the code may have changed.
Okay, thank you.
By the way, it does also look like the 2 houses on the other side of the causeway also don't meet the variance
I believe
requirements
they're
for
also
corner lots.
closer. Yes, yeah. We did, when I was asked that question by one of you today, and I tried to get plans from the city for some of those homes, so we just didn't have ample time to do it. But if you Google Earth map it, they all are too close.
It looks like all 4.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, any other questions from the board?
I do.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So I'm not real good with all these dimensions. There's been a lot of stuff talked about. My question is, from the center of the roadway on, I guess it's Isla Bahia, that's the street that goes over the bridge, the north-south street. So from the center of the roadway, I'm sorry, it's Harbor Isle Drive. So from the center of Harbor Isle Drive to the edge of the proposed new house, what is that dimension? And from the center of the roadway to the existing house, contiguous and to the east, what are those dimensions?
I believe the roadway, right, so it's 27 feet from the edge of pavement to the home here. So 27 feet from the home to the edge of pavement. And then the center line of Harbor Drive, I think is another, I don't know exactly how wide that roadway is. I think it's about 16 feet, so it'd be another 8 feet.
So 35.
That sounds about, I believe that's about right, yeah.
Right, I'm just trying to make sure that your proposed plan is at least in uniform with the house that's contiguous and across the street.
It is, and let me go back to the aerial, and I think I can show you that.
And that's why I was looking for a measurement from the center of roadway, because we discussed swales and easements and all kinds of interesting stuff. but
Right.
I'm into exact measurement.
It's a good question. So what I was showing you earlier when I showed you the dimensions.
Bigger.
So this is 23 Isla Bahia. The home on the other side has, we have, and you've got to add it all up, right? But we are 16 feet from the home to the property line. They are 14 feet from the home to the property line. And then we have an additional amount of swale that goes to the street, and they have an additional amount of swale that goes to the street. It's almost identical on both sides. So let me see if I can, I think I had one that I dimensioned it out. Here we go. Okay. So here, their property line is here. It's kind of like, you can even, their property line is actually in the middle of where their cars park. So their property line is 14 feet from their home, and then they have a swale width of plus or minus 15 feet for a total distance to the street of approximately 29 feet. But their home is also situated differently because they use that side to access their home, their garage. On this side of the street, the garage faces a different direction, so that will all be landscaped swale. And it's about 27 feet, so it's about 2 feet off from what the neighbor has.
How do we get from 14 to 27 and come up with 2? I guess I'm confused.
No, I'm saying they have 29 feet, we have 27. So it's a 2-foot difference.
Edge of pavement to house on either side.
Correct.
Is your swale
Correct.
a swale, or is it just landscaped and trees and whatnot, or is it a clear swale?
Oh, it's landscape. It's the trees I showed, those massive trees that the neighbors wanted to make sure were being preserved. It's heavily landscaped.
And it will remain that way?
Yes. Yes. That's the proposal.
And that's the binding agreement with the
That's the agreement with the neighbors, yes. Yes.
No fence, nothing, just trees?
No fence, just trees, just because that's city right of way. That's, so, but the tree spans, it's on both. So the tree is on the city right of way, and it's also on the private property, but if you look at the full set of plans for the home, the trees are meant to be preserved and they'll be protected through the construction, because it's not just that one, there's also one in the front, and they're beautiful, beautiful trees.
Anything else? Okay, in that case, we're going to open to the public. Is there anybody from the public wishing to speak on this matter? Seeing none, close the public hearing. So let's bring it back to the board for a vote.
Do we want a motion before a vote, or?
I would love to have a motion first. Something to vote on.
You know, as I look at this, there are 4 lots that have, on these 2 islands, that have this same issue. They're corner lots with water on the back, giving them abnormally king tide type of setback requirements, but only those 4. And it looks like all 4 of them are in the setback to some relatively similar degree. Given the fact that it's not increasing the variance, I would move for an approval of the variance request, because the variances as requested, as they meet the requirements for the issuance of variance under the city ULDR.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and we have a second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, let's take a vote.
Mr. Mead?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Stressa?
No.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Kent?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Elfman?
Yes.
Pass 6 to
Thank
1.
you. Motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so we have
Good evening, everyone.
before we move on to the next step, we do have the respondent come back from our fourth case. So this is case number 230-40001. What? And before we introduce, is there any disclosures?
Been to the site.
Okay, we'll go this way. Bob?
None.
Site?
Okay. Howard? Any disclosures?
None.
Okay. Doug? Bill? Okay, and none for me. So ma'am, if you could please state your name and your property address?
Sure. My name is Sydney Jacket, and I live at 2513 Gulfstream Lane.
Okay, and have you been sworn in yet?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. In that case, proceed.
Okay. We have 5 variance requests to allow us to build a freestanding shade structure at Chicky Hut. When we bought the property, there were no trees in the backyard. Our backyard faces west, so most of the day, yard is completely unusable. We live in a neighborhood where there's it's a special annexed neighborhood, so when you apply both the Fort Lauderdale codes and the annexed neighborhood codes, basically the size of the structure that we could build is about a postage stamp. So it would be pointless. We could put an umbrella up, basically. So hence the 5 requests. Do I need to read them, or should I read them? Okay. Section 4719-2P, variance request to allow us to have a rear yard setback of 7 feet, which is the minimum of 10 feet from the water. So it's a total variance request of 3 feet. Also, the height, which is also in that code, we're asking for it to be 15 feet instead of 12, which is a request of 3 feet variance. For the side yard setback, the code requires 7.5 feet. The posts are not going to be over that side yard setback. However, the overhanging grass will be hanging over, so we're asking for a variance of 2.5 feet. And the code requires us to have 10 feet from our structure. We're asking to build it up against the structure, so that'd be a variance of 10 feet. And then overall size, we're asking for 8.81% of the plot area. The code requires 5, and so we're asking for a variance of 3.81 feet.
Thank you. Is there any questions for the applicant?
I have one, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Has this been built yet? Okay.
Any other questions of the applicant? Okay. Seeing none, is there anybody from the public wishing to speak on this matter? Okay, in that case, public hearing is closed, and we're going to bring it back to the board for any motions or any further discussion.
Well, I'm not sure how we go earlier in the meeting to denial of a freestanding
That's right.
shade structure because it's too big and a little bit too high, and then grant 5 variances for a different type of shade structure.
That's right. Agreed.
Ma'am, I guess I do have a question for you. If you were to meet the setback requirements, how big would the shade structure end up being?
Do you know? 5 by 5?
Not worth building.
Hmm?
Not
Yeah.
worth building.
Of course, yeah. I think it's really complicated because when you apply both codes, it just really doesn't allow for anything back there.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion.
Okay.
I move that we approve the variances as requested as they meet the requirements for the issuance of variance under the ULDR.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Okay, let's call it. Jamie?
Mr. Nelson?
No.
Mr. Stresser?
No.
Mr. Wolf?
No.
Mr. Cooper?
No.
Mr. Kent? Yes. Mr. Mead? No. And Vice Chair Elfman?
No. Motion fails.
Sorry, ma'am.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Did we have our other tabled one potentially come back?
What, on Federal Highway?
Yeah.
I don't think so.
Can we all collectively remember, was that case number one?
That was
Just so
case
we-
number one.
Yes.
Just so we can save that agenda item.
It's the one with the pink.
Right, that's one of the last.
And while we're discussing, sir, you seem to be sitting here. Is there anything that you had before you? Is there anything that you had before us, or just?
Want to hang out? All right.
Okay. We're a good-looking board, so
It's
you know,
cheap.
it's okay.
It's cheap
You can't
anyway.
be-
You get dinner.
Technically, you cannot be that bored to find this interesting. That's an impossibility.
So I have something for the, I have a question for the city attorney. So if we have a no-show, what is the procedure?
Well, we could have denied it if we wanted to. We could have heard it and denied it, or heard it and approved it, or tabled it.
Yeah, we tabled it.
Well, we've tabled it twice. I would say the third time, if they don't show, we take action and be done with it.
Well, we did, you may recall, we did have to table it the first time because the gentleman
Because
didn't
the applicant
have.
wasn't there.
Right, he didn't have the proper power of attorney.
Right.
So he was present, but he didn't have the proper
Well,
documentation.
the tenant was present.
Yes, sir, without the, right.
Okay. So do we have a motion to table it?
We did already.
We did.
Yeah,
We
you
did.
did.
We tabled it already.
Then in that case, that part was done. That was easy.
You didn't vote on it, I don't believe.
We did not vote on it. We just mentioned to table it until the end of the meeting to see if they showed up. So in that case, let's just do a vote. to
Chairman, I
table it.
would move that we table this to our next regularly scheduled agenda with instructions for city staff to contact the applicant and let them know if they don't show, it's not getting tabled again.
Okay, and I guess you're still seconding that? Okay, let's just do a quick roll call.
Mr. Kent? Mr. Mead?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Stresser?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
And Vice Chair Elfman?
Yes. Okay, for further business, we have, it is this meeting where we elect the chair and the vice chair.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Chairman, I have some motions to make.
Go ahead.
I would move that we nominate Howard Elfman as the incoming chair.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion? That's an odd question to ask in this role.
Any other
If you
nominations?
felt like you were being railroaded, you are.
What did you have for dinner last night?
Yeah, exactly. Bert, you don't get to have a conversation on this one. Okay,
Any other nominations?
any other
Yes.
nominees?
I hear the question of any other nominations.
So is there any other nominations?
Sure, I'd like to nominate Freddie as the vice chair. Throw him under
Oh, we
the
haven't
bus.
gotten,
We have to
the
leave the chair
vice chair
first.
yet.
You said ask if there are any other nominations.
Is there any
Not for chair.
nominations for chair?
Oh, no, sir.
Okay. And on this end? Okay, so I guess, well, let's just make it official and.
Mr. Stresser? Mr. Stresser?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Caldwell?
Yes.
Mr. Kent?
Yes.
Mr. Mead?
Yes.
Mr. Nelson?
Do I have any other choices?
Not really.
Then yes.
I'm sitting next to you.
And Mr. Elfman?
I'll say yes on that, too. Thank you all, I appreciate it. So now, open up nominations for vice chair.
Mr. Chairman, I've got a motion for vice chair.
Okay?
Move Robert Wolf as vice chair.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. Is there any other nominations? Okay, hearing none. Let's do it again.
See, it's cheap at half the price.
Mr. Mead?
Yes.
You can grab a sandwich on the way out.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes.
Mr. Stresser?
Yes.
Mr. Wolf?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Mr. Kent?
Yes.
And Chair Elfman?
Yes. Is there anything for the good of the city?
Yes.
Okay.
I got 3 items.
Okay,
2 are relevant, 1 might be irrelevant, but it still needs to be brought up.
go ahead.
American flag. I would hope that at our next meeting,
We have an actual one?
an actual American flag at the meeting.
Yeah.
That was a bit disrespectful, but I understand the debacle, but I don't think that's a major request. Number 2, the audio. See, the gentleman's been over there working on the audio diligently, but it's a little difficult to hear down at this end. I don't know how it is down on that end. So if we could possibly work on that. And my last question, I don't know the relevance of it, but I thought it was important to be brought up because I have not been to this facility in a couple of years. Who in God's name removed Greg Burton's name from the building?
It's on
Greg
the
Burton.
door. It's on the door.
It
They
is-
just changed the typeface.
Okay.
Yeah.
I must have missed it because I walked in.
I went and re-looked after you said that.
Okay. I must have missed it because last time I saw it was on the building. I was kind of disappointed because he's, one of the hierarchies.
Yeah.
One of the wisdom guys. So I appreciate you clearing
Do you
that
mind
up.
if I modify your first comment about the flag?
Modify anything you'd like, sir.
It's a building that the public enters to do its business with the city routinely and regularly. We shouldn't have an American flag here for meetings. We should have an American flag here.
Always.
Always.
Right.
Agreed.
So that's communications to the city. I do want to bring up one more question, and Rhonda, you may be able to help with this as well. Rhonda, help me, Rhonda. Okay.
No.
I apologize.
That's okay. So one of the items that was discussed before is when people make a motion to be able to have proper verbiage along with it. So, and where did that come from? How did that become a requirement? Just curious.
Obviously, I'm filling in on a short-term basis, and Mr. Spence is normally counsel for the board. I don't know, but I can certainly provide, Mr. Nelson
I can
may
help
know.
in because it's language that Mr. Spence and I worked on to make sure that at least the format of the motion
Is
was
uniform.
something that would be defensible if there was an appeal of the motion.
And uniform as well.
That verbiage is communicated to every board member,
Yeah.
And we can provide copies for everyone next
if I
time.
could ask
just
city staff
make
to do so,
sure-
that would be
So it's
great.
consistent.
That's why we have a board attorney to clean it up. So we just say so moved and move on.
Okay, so no other business. Bert?
Just clarification, there is a flag in the front of the building,
Inside or outside?
outside. Just for
We
your,
could all
just for
walked
your information.
outside.
No, no.
done the
I-
pledge.
No, I agree there should be one for the inside, but I just want to let you guys know that we do have one in the building.
I'd be okay with the flag of the city of Fort Lauderdale, too.
Yeah. State of Florida.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
Maybe not.
You'd have DeSantis that
Okay, if it's going to be on the record, then put on your
No
mic.
politics here tonight.
Okay, logistical question.
I'm sure there's
Okay.
not. I'm sure
Are-
Dean.
Hey, guys.
Are we meeting here indefinitely?
Indefinitely.
Okay, can I possibly get this monitor pulled like a lot closer?
The monitor pull closer.
I can't see the monitor. It's just
Can I give you my eye doctor?
I have glasses, but that's just, it's too far and too close. If I can get it pulled closer.
It may
I
be
would
only
appreciate it.
another month or two. I'm advised the commission's going to be considering some leased space at the meeting next Tuesday. And that space will include like a commission-like chamber, which of course then all the administrative hearing and board hearings will take place. And my understanding generally is that that space may be ready by the end of August, if not before. Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. I can't warrant that, though.
Okay, if there's nothing else, then we are adjourned.
Right, we're taking the pink agenda item with us.
Appalled tonight that we approved the building, the last item on Bahia Vista, or whatever, Stephanie's project. Clearly that they bought the lot and they designed a building that was too big for the property. And if tonight is an example of what we're going to do of approving a variance to the setbacks in the ULDR, I think that we're going to see a lot more of it. I just don't see how you can negate following what the code requires. And clearly, they designed a house that's a $3 million house, and they've got $200,000 in architectural fees, including a landscape plan, and they come in here, and Stephanie sells it on the basis that they've got a swale that makes up for the land that they should have had for their 25-foot side yard setback.
With all due respect, I don't think that's appropriate comment.
Well,
This is an agenda topic.
Your
comments were appropriate.
No, I want to say,
I just don't think it's appropriate.
No, I want to say as
I'm
a
sorry.
learning experience.
Hold on, Fred, give me 1 second. I disagree with my board member to my right. I think it is a absolutely appropriate discussion. It might not be a tasteful comment that Fred had made, but I think it's something that definitely needs to be discussed, because that's why I was asking where the center of the roadway is, because it got extremely convoluted with this measurement and that measurement of exactly what we looked at, and I spent 2 hours out on the site of my own time trying to understand this.
Well,
The
let me
discussion on
suggest
this-
for you is a matter of sunshine law and collegial operation of boards. This is a great discussion to have had during
During
the
the-
matter
Yes.
now.
How is it a
After the
violation?
meeting.
Why is it wrong now?
Because it's not an
Wrong.
agenda item.
Because
it's a
the
public
matter is
hearing.
concluded, I mean,
It's a done deal. You're not going to change anything.
Nothing's being changed, we're discussing the item that's already been
Meeting's not
approved. But how's there a violation of the
adjourn.
sunshine law?
I didn't say that. That,
No, I know,
Howard
But I
said
heard that,
that.
I'm going, wait,
I-
where's the violation?
I didn't say that. I just
No,
think
we now
it's,
have a non-noticed item that we're discussing on
It's
future
approved.
policy.
it
been
just,
approved.
I mean,
Let Rhonda finish her conversation.
thank you, sir. It's better practice to discuss it fully within the confines of when the agenda item is heard. It's still a public meeting, there's still public comment, and the item's already been voted on and concluded. The applicant's gone.
Well, I just want to bring back, and Fred, I love you, but the comment was, we've already voted on Stephanie's item, but we need to use this as an instructive tool as we look on future items.
That's what
as
I
they
said,
come
is that
in.
I made a mistake in the fact that I didn't say what I had just said during the discussion of the item. and
Which
I
is
think you
what
need to
brings
use
a
it as
sunshine
learning
issue in.
experience, and don't let it happen again.
In your opinion.
And I will say with that we are adjourned. Thank you.
Perfect.